Laughing at billionaires, it's a wonderful pastime.
Hi, so thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of Laughing at Billionaires. I am grateful to have your ears. This podcast laughs at billionaires. We speculate, we make jokes, we get to know the sad boy billionaire cinematic universe and all the bit players that are making them make the world a worse place. We start to understand, or we strive to understand, what would make somebody so empty inside that they'd feel like they needed $1 billion to fill that hole. You got to feel pretty bad if you need $1 billion to be okay. And you got to be pretty self-centered. Along with that, we're going to be covering the crap billionaire John C. Malone. We won't be looking at how much he's worth. Who the fuck cares? We just want to look at his dumb damage. Once you're over $1 billion, it's not interesting. I know that's what they care about a lot. That's like the meaning of their tiny, restricted lives. But we don't. Anyway, and we'll also be looking at Donald Shoup, who does some really cool things. They are actually contemporaries. So, one, have very similar backgrounds. One chose destruction and reaped billions through monopolies, and the other one works to fundamentally change systems. A lot of the time we hear about billionaires being, breaking the chain and disrupting the system, and most of the time it's just finding a way to take as much money out of the system as possible, because actually changing the system is difficult and it takes a long time. They do sometimes break the system, and I think that's important to talk about because breaking things is much easier than building, and these are not builders, no matter how much they like to talk about it. So, a couple of ground rules. There will be no billionaires allowed on this podcast, no matter how much they beg and plead their case. They own vast media companies where they can project their worldview 24/7. So I'm sorry, this just isn't the place for you. And I even have to use one of their outlets, YouTube, to put my stuff out. So they don't need another spout for themselves. In that vein, there will be a club to go along with this podcast. It'll be Cais du Sodre. It's for people with a net worth of 10 million or less. Details to come in upcoming podcasts, but just know that as a listener, you are in on the ground floor of this exclusive club for people that are only worth 10 million or less. There will be no billionaires allowed. We will not have to swim in their disgusting stink in this club, in this very exclusive, very important social club. I wanted to talk about my little one sad part about being a billionaire is the fact that you can't access therapy because they have such a big power differential between them and everybody else in their orbit. They may be able to pay for a therapist, but they can't actually have a human connection with somebody who is so beholden to them and whose life can be destroyed based on their whims. So that sucks for them. If they ever want to deal with their issues, they're going to have to get rid of a lot of their money. If not, they're just sort of stuck in their own little weird artificial universe that they've created. Ugh. Anyway, on to our special boy, John Malone. He was born in 1941. He's an octogenarian using his last breaths to ruin the world. He's a guy who owns the most land in the U.S. Billionaires are always trying to do that, trying to own lots of stuff as if they're not going to die. But he will die, and the land will exist, and it won't be his. We never own land. It passes through our hands. We caregive it, and we often take it from people that should be taking care of it. So, yay, he's that guy. So why did I pick this guy? I picked him because he is the chairman and largest voting shareholder of Liberty Media, Liberty Global, and Curate Retail Group. He's a libertarian / rich guy that doesn't like it when rules get in the way of him gutting companies. And most, quote unquote, importantly, is he's overtaken Discovery, Warner Brothers, and he's gutting HBO Max, and he's gutting CNN, and he's gutting a lot of programs, and through a couple of fun emissaries. So let's get a little bit in on his background. He's self-made. No, he's not. They're never self-made. They aren't self-made. You don't live in the world alone. You aren't God. You are stuck in a society. He grew up in Connecticut. He went to a fancy prep school in Connecticut, Hopkins in New Haven. And then in 1963, he graduated from Yale University in New Haven. He didn't even move, with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and economics. Pin that in your mind. He was a very fancy merit scholar, blah, blah, blah. In 1964, he graduated from Johns Hopkins University with a master's degree in industrial management and then returned for a doctorate in operations research. Typical rich guy shit. He was born there, he stayed there, and now he feels like, wow, I really earned that home run. So, how did he get his money? Well, he got it in cable. When you start to follow billionaires, it's just a bunch of companies being bought and sold, and this guy loves monopolies. So he was at TCI, and he worked on a merger with AT&T in 1998 for $32 billion. So under his watch, Liberty's reach has expanded from providing cable service to owning all the networks on its infrastructure. So he's taken Discovery Channel, Virgin Media, QVC, Lionsgate, which also owns Starz, the Game Show Network, and more. He also likes status symbols, even though his Wikipedia claims that he's not into the glamorous life. He bought Formula One and the Atlanta Braves. This is a guy that cares about status, that cares about being important. So, he's also donated $250,000 to Donald Trump. So he's also stupid. I mean, stupid or extremely greedy person that doesn't care about other people because he has such a black hole of self-loathing. Both not great. And then he's been involved with the Cato Institute, created by Ed Crane, Murray Rothbard, and Charles Koch, who the hell cares, who's another shit billionaire you've probably heard about. We'll just keep him pinned in our mind as well as we talk about to different billionaires. In his Wikipedia, it claims that he supported Bloomberg in 2020. We don't know how he voted. We don't know what he did. He's a crazy person who only watches Fox News. I would be shocked if he did. That's my speculation. Pure speculation. This is all speculation. Okay, Malone is married to Leslie, and they have 2 children and a ton of houses. Because why not be a billionaire if you can just, like, take up a bunch of space that other people could occupy? So they love to say that they live in Elizabeth, Colorado, but they have places all over the place. And what's really funny about his wife is that she's active in dressage and horse breeding. So she's just a typical rich bitch. Sorry, that's like what she is according to the Wikipedia. Like, I'm sorry that you're so basic, that you picked somebody so basic. John Malone was sadly awarded the Citizen of the West presented by then Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper. Ew. So, he's the guy who bought Universal Discovery and is gutting CNN, HBO Max, and shelving stories with meaningful representation like the Batgirl movies. He's not doing this directly. He's just buddies with the people that are doing it, who owe him their livelihood. So, take from that what you will. The first asshole is David Zaslav. He's the president and CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. He's slashing all these programs for tax purposes. Even though all these programs seem to have not done well. Although it could be a long game plan of slashing everything, making sure all the content sucks. We'll get to that. So when Time Warner was sold to AT&T originally back in 2016, it was worth about $85 billion. So Warner Brothers Discovery, which is a merger of basically Time Warner and Discovery, is now something around 30 to 35 billion. So he's not doing great. The stock dropped after he cut everything. Then HBO Max still had House of the Dragon, which had a huge premiere, so he looks better, but that's just shit that happened before he got there. Also, Zaslav has gotten super rich. From him, he's apparently worth $200 million. So I'm not talking about billionaires' net worth, but I'll sometimes mention other people who got rich around them. So you always see how these people aren't really able to have integrity because they can't help it. They don't have the ability to. All right. And then a generous take from Alex Kranz on The Verge is that Zaslav at The Verge, it says Zaslav doesn't care about the stuff a lot of us care about, such as a big spread of readily available content that speaks to smaller groups, often underrepresented in popular media, all of a fairly affordable price. Zaslav isn't here to better enrich our entertainment landscape. He's here to make money. So Zaslav is turning off the content spigot and reorienting the company into something much more fiscally and potentially culturally conservative. The company's stock has been on a downward spiral, but this could very well be a great thing for investors in Warner Brothers Discovery. It just won't be a great thing for the rest of us. So that's from Alex Kranz at The Verge. So another sad boy doing his bidding is at CNN, and that's Chris Licht. Now the chairman and CEO of CNN and the former showrunner for Late Night with Stephen Colbert. So he did a heel turn and became an asshole. So a couple of people have left or been fired. John Harwood, the CNN White House correspondent, and Brian Seltzer, the host of Reliable Sources, got his show axed. And then people are also noticing that he has been meeting, according to a report, the network boss camped out in mid-July in a room on the first floor of the Senate side of the Capitol S-120, where he asked GOP lawmakers to come talk with him privately and gave them private reassurances that they could do whatever the fuck they wanted on his network. That's my speculation, based on how correspondents have been responding to Republicans when they've come on and lied or pushed bullshit. So how's that gone for them? Well, according to the S&P Global Market Intelligence estimates, CNN's profitability will drop to $956.8. They were already on a downward spiral, so this is just another downward spiral. They are ranked third behind Fox and MSNBC. Fox is stable. I mean, they lie, and that's a very funny thing to talk about that network as though it's a cable network in competition with them, because it's just like a fantasy network for people that want to live in the apocalypse but don't want to do anything to help the world. So the first time since 2016 that's going to be the first time since 2016 that its profits dipped below $1 billion, according to an unnamed source to the New York Times. Part of that is because they prematurely ended CNN Plus. So we'll see how that all goes. But also in terms of primetime ratings, there's a downward slide of 20. Their ratings are down 27% over the year, and MSNBC's are down 23%. Fox News is up 1%. Again, it's a fantasy network. It's not really cable news. So let's talk about the policies that don't suck, because that's a big thing of suck. First, we'll talk a little bit about John C. Malone. He's just a typical person that was positioned well his entire life, that probably thinks that he did it all himself, and that doesn't have a moral compass, and believes that because he doesn't have a moral compass and he got the most money, that he's the best guy. And that's kind of it. Again, destruction is easier. He's a guy who made his money off of monopolies, off of merging a bunch of companies together and then taking everything out of the company that they could. And that's it. I mean, they're not about providing great entertainment. They're not about art. They're not about even providing a good service as a cable news provider. Their goal is just, as a cable provider, their goal is just more money. And he's happy to make over CNN Plus. This is all speculation. CNN, in his own image, even if it's not officially happening, even if he's not supposedly the most powerful person there, but because he has the ear of the people that are in charge, he's making over CNN into another Fox News, pretending that that's the middle. Apparently, this guy only listens to Fox, so the idea that he would have any sense of what the middle is, especially when it's an out-of-touch billionaire that literally lives isolated from everybody else on, thousands upon thousands of acres of land, is a bit laughable. This is not the guy that is going to solve our problems. This guy is so out of touch with the world and so ensconced in his tiny little village of idiots that he actually thinks that his view is the center. This guy who's in a fight with Rupert Murdoch only listens to Rupert Murdoch's news network, news, quote unquote, network. Like, I'm sorry, that's kind of funny. like, like this guy thinks that a fellow billionaire is not lying to him. How smart is he? Anyway, let's go on to somebody that is not entirely depressing. And I don't know if people are great. I don't believe that there's just solid good in the world, but I do think there are people that have really given into their baser instincts. And I think billionaires fall into that. And then I think the people that have decided to try to work to really improve systems in the world should be applauded because it's hard work and it's the work that doesn't just get you a bunch of money in a pile in front of your face after like destroying a bunch of people's lives, where you then get to give money and pretend like you're the good guy. We'll get to that in the end, and but I'll explain. All right, so let's hear about Donald Shoup. He was born in Long Beach in 1938, so 3 years before John C. Malone. And he also went to Yale and he majored in the same thing, electrical engineering and economics. And then he got a doctorate from Yale in economics. He's a professor of urban planning at UCLA who is a Georgist economist. So let's learn a tiny bit about what a Georgist economist is. We're going to be very not detailed about this. It takes a while. We'll see if this comes up with other people that are doing cool things. I think that's always interesting to see what philosophies are informing people. Are they useful? I don't believe that any philosophy explains the world, and trying to superimpose it on the world and make it reality isn't going to work, but using it to inform ideas of how things work and give you ideas to make adjustments to make policies better is awesome. So here's about Georgism, also in modern times called Geoism, and it's known historically as the single tax movement. Okay. So it's an economic ideology. This is taken from Wikipedia. I'll have links in the description of everything that I try to refer to. Not everything's perfectly covered. Think of it more as a bibliography than sources. Is an ideology holding that although people should own the value they produce themselves, the economic rent derived from land, including the natural resources, the commons, and urban locations, should belong equally to all members of society. It's developed from the writers of American economist and social reformer Henry George, with the Georgist paradigm seeks solutions to social and ecological problems based on principles of land rights and public finance, which attempt to integrate economic efficiency with social justice. Henry George is best known for popularizing the argument that government should be funded based on land rent rather than on taxes on labor. And I feel like this depends on how people are evading taxes. So if, especially for John C. Malone, land rent would be great because he has so much land that he should be taxed on it. Now, at other times, people hide their assets in different ways, and I think we always have to be nimble in terms of how we tax people. So a little bit more about Donald Shoup and his work. This is from his website. In his 2005 book, The High Cost of Free Parking, Shoup recommended that cities do 3 things. 1, charge for market prices for on-street parking, spend the revenue to benefit the metered areas, so the places are near that parking, not just going into the general fund. We'll get to that later. And then remove off-street parking requirements. And then in his 2018 book, Parking and the City, Shoup and 45 other academics and practicing planners examine the results where cities have adopted these policies. And according to him, the successful outcomes show this trio of reforms may be the simplest, cheapest, and fastest way to improve city life, protect the environment, and promote social justice. So this is what he says in an interview. Metered money tends to go straight into the general fund, and who knows what that pays for. I think the money should go straight out to the other side of the meter and fix sidewalks or clean the street, or in some cases provide free Wi-Fi, whatever will benefit the district. And I think this is also in keeping with strong towns, which may be informed by some of his work, which is that a lot of the time the downtown area or the place like a strip mall that might look like it isn't a very important economic area gives a lot of money to the city, and that money isn't reinvested in that area. It instead goes out to the suburbs, to the people that have really long drives and aren't bringing in the same amount of revenue as places that are more dense. So let's go back to metered parking. Meter money tends to, so the idea is basically that the meter money should be used for improvements, specifically on metered streets. So you'll see the benefits right away of things like more street trees or street lighting or even daycares for children. Or you can even just ask the residents themselves what they would like that money to be spent on. That totally changes the conversation because it turns the parking meter into a cash register for the whole neighborhood. So that's one thing that we can always think about, is making sure metered money goes to the people that are you giving the space for people to park. And then the other thing that is really exciting, and the reason why I decided to use him as, besides just being a contrast to John C. Malone, is that now in California, Assembly Bill 2097 is heading to Governor Newsom's desk, and it would prohibit local governments in many scenarios from enforcing minimum parking requirements on residential or commercial developments if it is located within half a mile of a major transit stop. The bill would not prevent property owners from building parking, but rather limit mandates on minimums, which is really cool. So that is on the governor's desk. If you can, please advocate for that. And you see that somebody can go to Yale and not be a shithead, which is a shock when you think about Yale. And they majored in the same thing. And one person decided to eviscerate companies and stay inside his own tiny little bubble and not try to fix anything in the world. And the other guy actually went out and is doing the hard work that is finally starting to be realized in the US. North America has neglected transit for such a long time and fallen into a paradigm that was established in like the 1930s and 1950s. Oh, another interesting fact is like, we didn't have a parking meter till 1935, and we've had cars since the early 1900s. So people got really used to free parking without thinking about the impact that parking has had on our cities and the way that cars cut up our cities in all kinds of different pieces. Anyway, it's just exciting to see somebody actually work to change systems, and that work is difficult, and I think we can't underestimate it. Building is hard, destruction is easy. Let's go and look towards the builders. Let's look towards investing our time into building a better world. So be a Donald Shoup and feel bad, I guess, for the John C. Malones of the world. Anyway, I want to talk about something that's really important that passed away recently. Barbara Ehrenreich. She is the author of Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America. And she just passed away at 81. She was a democratic socialist and a very cool woman. And I think it's important to see her work. And I also really love this quote. And I think it really feeds into what my whole point of this podcast is, which is when someone works for less pay than she can live on, when, for example, she goes hungry so that you can eat more cheaply and conveniently, then she has made a great sacrifice for you. She has made you a gift of some part of her abilities, her health, and her life. The working poor, as they are approvingly termed, are in fact the major philanthropists of our society. They neglect their own children so that the children of others will be cared for. They live in substandard housing so that other homes will be shiny and perfect. They endure privation so that inflation will be low and stock prices high. To be a member of the working poor is to be an anonymous donor, a nameless benefactor to everyone else. And I think this is really important whenever we hear about a billionaire being a quote-unquote philanthropist. Instead of a billionaire being a philanthropist, this is for you guys, pay your taxes, billionaires. Look at how you pay employees at all levels. Look at how you pay for goods. Look at the elements of your business model that are missing because you take money out for yourself. Look at your true impact on the world, not just one-off large gifts that you can easily give because you have taken so much money out of society. With that, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm really grateful for everybody that's listening. I hope my friend who is Portuguese isn't too upset with how I pronounced our new club, which will be called Cais du Sodre. I know, it's not perfect. And I am grateful for your ears. I think a few of you might be coming from Twitter. I commented on that quote from Barbara Ehrenreich on Twitter, and I just think she's really important. I think this concept is really important. I think we really have to divorce billionaires from philanthropists. I think that's a lie. Anyway, have a great week.